Hello, my name's Sabrina Moreland, and I'm one of the librarians here at Walter State. And this presentation touches on the databases that will be most helpful to you in looking for literary criticism for your American Literature 2 class, and also some information on MLA style that you may or may not be familiar with. So to get started, just a couple terms to review. We'll be using those databases to find those types of sources you're looking for. And so I'll be taking you into those. I'll have a slide that shows the ones that are most appropriate. And I've also sent some separate videos on how to use those, a demonstration on how to use them. Now, types of sources, you're generally looking for um, scholarly articles from an academic journal, but there might be cases, depending on the type of assignment, where you could use a magazine article from like a literary magazine, or even a review of some kind of play or film adaptation of your work. So it just depends on the type of assignment. We're generally looking for literary criticism. So looking at that work of, poetry or drama or novel, whatever it is, through a certain lens, or examining a certain element from that work. And then we use MLA formatting, of course, to document where all of our information comes from both the primary and secondary sources that we use. Now, the good news is, there really isn't any bad news, but the really good news is that what you learned in English 1020, so Comp 2, can be applied to this type of research. So we're still going to have those three basic access points. So your author, title, and literary element or technique. So depending on whoever you're researching, or if it's a poem or drama, all this applies. And then the theme or character or symbol, whatever it is you're looking for as far as that technique or element goes. So I might be researching James Fenimore Cooper's novel, The Last of the Mohicans, and looking for information on how this idea of American identity is a theme in that work. And I could use, of course, just the author and title to start searching and see what each database has in relation to my author and title. And then I'd want to generate some extra subject terms and keywords that will help me expand on what I'm doing as far as research on that element. So this should look familiar, or at least sound familiar to you from your Comp 2 days. And this is just a couple more examples, again, of author, title, elements. So Stephen Crane's novel, Maggie, a Girl of the Streets, looking for character, violence, poverty, that sort of thing. I could be looking at The Turn of the Screw, which is Henry James' novel, and look for death, horror, paranoia, terror, synonyms of that sort of concept. I could even be taking multiple authors from maybe a certain style or a certain type of literary criticism and looking for, all of those together. So the whole idea, though, is you're taking those same access points that you've explored before and applying it to just this American literature frame. So literary criticism, I know you've probably got lots of instruction about this from your professor or instructor, but just to add sort of another level of research with this, whenever we're creating terms or where to look, you could be looking for a certain series or collection of criticism. So in the library, in the physical library at Walter State, we have some criticism in print form. And even when I was getting my English degree many moons ago, I would have to go to the library and find 19th century literary criticism or 20th century and so forth, and find the index and look up the title or the author and which volume. And I actually loved it because I'm a big nerd. But you might want to think about some other sort of collections of criticism that you could perhaps even find in the ebook collection. Harold Bloom's Modern Critical Views appears a lot in the ebook collection. Critical Survey of Long Fiction, they have short fiction, poetry, drama. So there's all kinds of other places to think about that broadly touch on criticism that might contain your author and work. You could also plug in the type of criticism. So these are just pretty traditional ones: Marxist, historical, feminist, deconstruction, so forth. So this whole work of writing women's literary history would be a feminist perspective on different works of literature. And so you could like do a search for that and see if any very broad pieces come up that contain your author or title within them. So that's just sort of another layer of how you consider exploring literary criticism since you are in an upper level English class. Now these are the databases that I'm going to be making separate videos on. So your instructor will have those to share with you as well. And they probably look super familiar. Literature Resource Center, JSTOR, eBook Academic Collection, I've shown many times in lots of classes and the other librarians have as well. So if you feel comfortable, don't watch those videos unless you just really like the sound of my voice. But I have just done some searches in there in each of those to show you how to use those databases in case you've forgotten. And I am going to do a video on EBSCOhost too. Now this may or may not be something you've seen before, but there are certain ways of searching this really big database for certain types of literary information. And so you might want to take a look at that one if you have never used it before. And then American National Biography kind of looks like it doesn't fit in here, but if you're looking for historical information, of course, background on your author, maybe just trying to learn about what inspired your author, poet, whoever to write this, what he or she went through and endured during, their lifetime, this is a good database to check out as well, to sort of get that background information. So again, you've probably seen some of these before, and these will be separate videos that I send to your instructor. Now, MLA style is a formatting formatting style that you've used probably multiple times throughout your education. And so some of what I'm going to say is going to look familiar to you, but if not, it's just a good review for you if you're not, familiar with it as well. So where to get information for help? The MLA guide that the library has on their page. So if you go to the library homepage under Citing Sources, there's an MLA guide that you can view, has all kinds of good information on it. Purdue OWL site. I go there all the time for all kinds of questions. If I don't know how to document a YouTube video, that sort of information is on there as well. So very detailed examples of things, lots of information, and you may or may not have rented or purchased an MLA handbook. Also has good information. And don't forget, you can always ask me or ask a librarian if you need help with any of that citation stuff. Now this is just formatting tips, just to remind you that in the title of your paper, all titles are centered. You should use Times New Roman 12-point font, 1-inch margins, and no extra spaces between paragraphs. So there's a way to check that little box under formatting paragraph that gets rid of that extra space. And you should have your page numbers on the top right of your paper, and your last name should be included there. So that's like the paper itself. And then the very last page of your paper, your works cited page, will have the title Works Cited or Work Cited in the center. If you only use one source, it's just a work that you have cited. But if there's more than one, it'll be works cited. And then the actual citation itself, the paragraph box, there will be a hanging indent. It should be double spaced. And again, you want to watch those spaces between paragraphs. So all that information, alphabetical order, by author's last name or by the title if you can't find the author. And again, all that information is in all those helpful, like Purdue OWL site, the LibGuide, and the handbooks. Now, in-text and parenthetical citations, you know this, just to review, you use the author page method, and you have to cite anything that you quote or paraphrase. So even if it's in your own words, if it came from somebody else, you have to say where it came from. And the in-text citation is whenever you put the author's name in what you've written, and then you include the page number in the parentheses. And the parenthetical citation is whenever you end your quote or your paraphrase, whatever it is you're saying, with the author and title, or the author and page number rather, in the parentheses. So it's the same in document citing. It just depends on where you put that author's name. And I have some examples. This is from the Comp 2 textbook. So I maybe was writing about the Mask of the Red Death, and that where it says Poe, Edgar Allan, and so forth, this is my works cited entry. So I followed the format for a anthology or collection where there's an editor and there's an edition and all this stuff. Have my page numbers included. Now, in the body of my paper, if I were quoting something about Poe here, from Poe's work rather, I would have Poe informs the reader, etc. So Poe is in the text. He wrote the story, my primary source, and page 433. So in-text citation. Now, same exact thing, only this time I have a signal phrase, right? I lead into whatever it is I'm talking about. And I have Poe 433 in the parentheses. So it's the same information. I'm just documenting the in-text up here or the parenthetical down here. Similarly, with the secondary source, so these are the articles we look at. I have an article written about Poe's work up here. My works cited entry is by Joseph Garrison. And so this is an academic article from a database. And in my in-text citation, I say according to Garrison, right? And I quote him, and then here's the page number. And likewise with a parenthetical citation, I don't mention Garrison at all. I'd say what I want to say, and I put Garrison 146 in the parentheses. So that's just another example of how to show you the difference between in-text and parenthetical citations. So this slide, a lot of words on here, but pretty basic idea of if you only use one source in a paragraph, or maybe even throughout your whole paper, you only have to acknowledge that author's last name one time. So the first time you use it, you write Poe 433 or whoever it is, and then because this is another quote or another piece of information from that area, I would just put 433 here, and then your instructor or the reader knows it all came from one source. Now naturally, if you use multiple sources, as I did in the second paragraph, I've quoted from Poe here, and then I used information from Garrison in that second area. So I'd have to have both of them listed every time to show the difference between which source I am consulting. And then we see a lot of questions about indirect quotes and sources and that sort of thing. So if you are reading an article and you find a great quote but it's really by somebody else in that article, this is how you follow those MLA style guidelines. So you would use quoted in to indicate the source consulted, right? So then an example here would be, talking about, Poe again, and author Henry James claimed that, and he said this about Poe's work, and so it's quoted in Garrison 136. So this article that I consulted mentions Henry James' quote. So citing Garrison's article, which is citing a quote by Henry James. So that's sort of how you do that indirect quote stuff. And again, all this stuff is on the MLA help pages. And these are just 2 links to some extra practice, some games, and some information other libraries have collected or shared. You don't have to use them, of course. I just thought I'd include them. Maybe you're looking for some fun on a Saturday night. But I just did want to have those there for you if you wanted extra help. And lastly, my contact information. This is an online class, and because of all the COVID-19 stuff, we'll probably never meet in person. But here's my office phone number, my email address, and if I'm embedded in your eLearn class list, you can always contact me that way as well. But you can always call Walter States Library and ask for a librarian, and we're all super happy to help you with keywords, using databases, your citations, so anything you need help with research related. So again, look for those videos about how to use those databases, and thanks for listening.